Well, it is almost here, the final game of the National Football League season on Sunday. It'll be the Eagles and the Chiefs for a second time in 3 years in the big game. You're watching the All 32 pod. Mike Giardi, Will Parkinson alongside, as always. A reminder that this show brought to you by PrizePicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. And GameTime, best tickets, best prices to get you in anywhere to anything that you want to see. Will, I thought that we'd take a sort of a bigger picture view of how these teams got here and sort of what are the reasons why, what are the defining characteristics before we got into the actual X's and O breakdown of the game. And I figured I'd kick us off here because I look at Philadelphia and there's three things that jump to mind. One is ownership. The second is the general manager. And the third is obviously the roster and the way they built this roster. And I don't know where you stand on it, but like to me, we generally don't talk about owners unless they're bad ones, right? Like occasionally we sit here and say like, oh, but like we just did the coaching breakdown, right? Or we said, well, just what was Jacksonville doing? It takes them 2 weeks to fire their GM when they realized they can't get their coaches. Like that process was flawed. And we know what Mark Davis has been all about in Vegas. And there's other places. We've obviously talked this year about the Jets and some of the Woody Johnson stuff. And to me, Jeffrey Lurie, the Philadelphia owner, sits there and says, what's your plan? And I'll write the check. And he has consistently been willing to spend more cash than anybody else in the National Football League. And because he's surrounded by smart guys, and Howie Roseman, his general manager, has certainly been on a heater, right? That they do things contractually that a lot of teams won't. Jalen Hurts has this massive contract, right? $250 million or whatever it is. His base salary every year is $1 million. They built in the restructure basically every single year. And to me, you want to talk about laying a good foundation. That's laying a good foundation right there.
Yeah, I think Devin McCourty was on my show the other day, and he talked about coaching top down and bottom up in terms of like you got to be able to coach the bottom of the roster all the way up through the owner in a sense. Like you got to be in control of everything. And a lot of owners are kind of, I don't want to say obviously naturally they're always going to be, they're going to speak from the top and, whatever, but they almost feel like they meddle too much, or do they meddle enough, or there's the whole thing. I think Howie and Jeffrey Lurie have got this relationship where like Jeffrey Lurie meddles, I think, but it's not to the point where it hinders Howie from doing what he wants to do with the roster. There'll be certain moves. Hey, we got to pay this guy, or I'm not willing to spend maybe here, or maybe this. The infrastructure and analytics, the infrastructure the amount of people in the front office, the coaching staff. I'm sure Big Dom's making well over 7 figures to stand there and, for some reason be allowed to do what he's allowed to do on the sideline, but right. He's allowed to do it. So more power to him. They spend a ton on the roster. They create flexibility every year when they need to go get something or give up draft picks or give up, go sign a Saquon Barkley. They'll do it. If it's trading for an AJ Brown, they'll do it. So I just think that their organizational infrastructure is as good as we see in the league. And again, you mentioned it, this roster is special. This roster has been really good for a long time. It continues to stay good. I think, funny enough, the weakest parts of potentially this game and is the quarterback and head coach for the Eagles is probably like the things you might have, quote unquote, the most question marks about. But they've got, whether we like them or not necessarily, they've got big name coordinators. They've got, for what it's worth, a big name head coach at this point. They've got a quarterback that's getting paid a ton of money. They've got receivers that are paid well. They've got D linemen, they take care of their guys. And the Philly fan base is, as we know, extremely demanding. And, their standard right now over the last, generally outside of, I guess it was that 2021 class, like when they had the weird Doug P tank at the end kind of year, they're pretty much been amazing since 2017. Like it's, every year the standard now is like you expect 12 wins and a deep run in the playoffs. And so organizational infrastructure is paramount to be good year over year. The roster is special, which has allowed them to not only be good year over year, but this year specifically. And then they also, Mike, are at the point where they've got AJ Brown and Saquon and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert all in their prime. So they've got all their skill guys in their prime. They've got a majority now of the offensive line in their prime, which they kind of shifted a little bit from last year where it felt like they got a little older. They shifted a couple things around. Obviously, Jason Kelce could still play, no shade against him, but they've gotten younger with some homegrown guys. And defensively, they rebuilt on the fly. They invested a ton the last 2 drafts, and it's come together in a weaker NFC that the roster is peaking at the right time. And again, it's no shade towards Jalen Hurts. I just mean that everything around him is really damn good on both sides of the football. Honestly, the one thing we didn't mention that I have a concern about, Jake Elliott's been pretty awful. I feel like for all year, but specifically, I feel like in the playoffs, it's he's going to miss at some point. That's just one thing to monitor is we don't talk enough about kickers. And I know this game will be indoors, but Jake Elliott's not been Jake Elliott of, the 2017 run or even obviously 2 years ago.
Yeah, when you were talking about Howie Roseman, the one thing that comes to mind is aggressive. And you mentioned some of the maneuvers. Just look at this year. They looked at their secondary, gave up 34 touchdowns a season ago. Darius Slay, James Bradbury, they're a little older. They said, we can't do that again. So what do they go do? Not only do they get Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo in the first round, who started the Senior Bowl when we were there last year and has had an awesome rookie season. He was my PFWA Defensive Rookie of the Year. But then they trade up in the second round as Cooper DeJean sort of slides a little bit because he had the fractured tibia that basically didn't allow him to work out during the spring. And they get him. And DeJean gets inserted into the lineup in week 5. And since that bye in week 5, they've won 15 of 16 games. They were 2-2 before. They've won 15 of their last 16. Hasn't always looked awesome, but they continually find ways to get it done. The one game they did lose in there was when Jalen Hurts was hurt in the first quarter, had to leave the game, and it still took a ridiculous Jaden Daniels fourth quarter performance for that game to swing in Washington's favor. And it's not just the aggressiveness, all right, in the draft there, but you mentioned Barkley, trading for A.J. Brown. How about Vic Fangio? Their defense was a disaster last year. They went through 2 different coordinators, including Matt Patricia, asked to run someone else's defense. And then they said, all right, Fangio didn't work out in Miami. I know what I'm going to get with him. He's a veteran guy. We're going to bring him in here. And they changed the whole again, they raised the floor. We talk about that a lot. But they also, because of the infusion of talent with DeJean, with Mitchell, with the draft class last year of Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and Jordan Davis the year prior, that all of a sudden now they're loaded with young, fast, explosive talent. And it's just that guy identifies the problems and goes out and fixes them.
One thing I wanted to add with Fangio, I was a little concerned because, look, the whole league kind of caught up to what Fangio is doing. Hey, we're going to sit in cover 2. And the whole, that's the Fangio defense, right? And everyone copied it because it worked so well against Kansas City, while he was in Denver. Do I have a couple of question marks about end of game situations where sometimes they get a little too passive? Sure. But remember, this is a guy in Fangio last year who was in Miami, and I thought everyone was like, wow, this is going to be the hire, and the way it worked for Philly this year. And we talked about organizational infrastructure and culture and these things. Those guys wanted no part of being coached hard. Zero. Yeah. They wanted nothing to do with it. They threw a party and a celebration when he got fired. And the Eagles guys have had the direct opposite. Zach Bonds had a really good year. He has it's a little Brian Cushing-ish, if you get what I'm saying. It feels like, maybe not, but it's a little bit of a fast rise there. But look, I truly think you got to have a roster that's built out and a coaching staff that can resemble how we want to coach, who we want to coach, and how we want to approach things. And the Eagles have a good match of, while I'm not the biggest Sirianni guy, especially in the defensive side of the ball this year, those guys play and resemble a lot of what those Fangio defenses did in Denver. And when you have the talent on offense, they do. And the way the NFC is built, they're just more talented than you, and they let you know it. Saquon, 2 yards, 75. A.J. Brown, quiet. Oh my God, third and 15, gotta have it, gotta change the momentum. A.J. Brown makes the play. That's who they've been this year, and that's who they've been for a long time now.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. It's funny, we talk about the fatigue with the Chiefs, the national media. It's been a big discussion. Are people tired of the Chiefs? Well, you could be tired of the Eagles too, because they seem to be either in this game or knocking down the door of this game every year for the last 7. PrizePicks. It's the last football game of the year, the last big football game of this season. So don't miss out on that. The best place to win cash is PrizePicks while watching the big game. It's also giving away a free pick for the big game, and that's Patrick Mahomes needing just 1 yard or more of passing. Combine that square with another square, you win. You can also go up to as many as 6 squares. For instance, do you think, I don't know, Travis Kelce's going to have more or less than 62.5 receiving yards? How about Xavier Worthy's come on like a freight train lately? More or less than 56.5 receiving yards? Just play PrizePicks. You have the opportunity to put your money where your mouth is. Download the app. Insert the code CLNS. That'll get you $50 off your first $5 bet. Again, download the app, PrizePicks, $50 off your first $5 bet. You don't even have to win. PrizePicks, run your game. We will have our picks at the very end of this pod, and I am looking forward to it. Little deep dive in that one. How about now looking at Kansas City, Will, and the way that they got here? And to me, I think, obviously,
let's talk about the refs, right? That's what we're supposed to do.
We're not going to do that. And you can talk about Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, we'll talk about Patrick Mahomes as we go through the process, certainly as we break down the game. But to me, it starts with the coaching, right? Andy Reid is a better coach now than he was in Philadelphia, and he was a damn good coach. He got Steve Spagnuolo, who's done a phenomenal job with his defense. We know big game Spagnuolo. I think, what did I see the record was? It's like he's like 16-4 as a DC in the playoffs, or some outrageous number. Like he just, and again, he's been coaching good teams, but like they just have this synergy there. Every once in a while, I think Andy gets a little too conservative, but like by and large, you can't knock sort of the way they built this, and it starts with those two guys. I think personally, they've rotated different offensive coordinators, but it's Andy's offense, and Andy's calling the shots. And that to me, Brett Veach, the GM, and sort of he's got an outstanding group of lieutenants, including Mike Borgonzi, who's now the general manager of the Tennessee Titans, that got hired in this cycle. But it's just sort of, all right, we have Patrick Mahomes, and then the Tyreek Hill thing happened. You move off of Tyreek Hill, and you're like, well, Patrick's going to elevate. And he's elevated the guys around him. He doesn't have the same talent level as he did the explosive Chiefs that were sort of the version of what it was when he first came into the league and first took over. But they looked at it and said, all right, we can put these pieces that maybe one day they become this explosive group. But for now, it's just a solid group. But what have they done? They built the offensive line. And look, I know the tackles this year have been concerning, and obviously Joe Thuney's had to kick from left guard to left tackle, but in general, that's sort of where they focused. I was writing it down, 2021 draft, it's Creed Humphrey, who's their center, he's outstanding. Trey Smith, who's going to be a free agent, going to make a lot of money, he's their right guard. He was in that draft. Joe Thuney was signed in free agency, and Thuney's been an all-pro, Pro Bowl level player for them during this time at left guard and now playing left tackle. So it's like, they built this thing up. Jawan Taylor is someone they signed to be their right tackle. And look, that hasn't worked. But like they invested big resources in a player who at least looked like on paper would be a good fit there. So I feel like they've just understood what they have in Mahomes. Obviously, everybody understands what they have in Mahomes, but they've done a good job of sort of building around that. And it's just allowed them to be, they've won 2 Super Bowls. They're aiming for a three-peat, which has never been done in National Football League, modern National Football League history. And to me, those are the things that really stand out about sort of their foundation and how they got to this point.
Yeah, you hit on it. I think this is all about coaching more than anything. I think they are the best coached team in the league. I think they've been that way for some time now. Andy's, I would say, is pretty clearly the best coach in the league. It's hard to argue that, as much as like I love Shanahan and McVay and Kevin O'Connell and Tomlin and those guys. Like, there's a lot of names you could argue, but like, there's the guy that's always holding the trophy. And look, I think Andy's done a good job of not only being able to be. We talk a lot about the refs, and we talk a lot about the Chiefs in these close games, and they're not playing well, and the whole thing. We do this whole thing every week, but as you know, you covered Bill Belichick for 20 plus years. It's all about a lot of the NFL is about not losing, not beating yourself, letting the other team beat themselves, capitalizing on mistakes. When you do make a mistake, not compounding that mistake. The Chiefs do it better than anybody. The Chiefs make mistakes. Patrick's throwing interceptions. They fumble the ball. They have penalties. You know what they don't do, Mike, is they don't spiral and make that another killer mistake that you can't get back. They might miss a field goal. You know what? They're not going to miss a second. They might have a bad punt. They're not going to and then when you make a mistake and you compound it with a second, they'll kill you. And that's, to me, what's kind of gotten them here is they play really sound football. They play really clean football, generally speaking. I feel like they're pretty penalty free. And even if it's not, the numbers don't bear it out, I don't feel like they have those killer, it's the killer pass interference. It's the killer roughing the passer that it's not just about the refs calling it or not calling it. It's about them also making a conscious effort to know where the line is and where they can get open. And then they're also driven, obviously, by the best player in the sport and a Hall of Fame tight end that they have a lot of the same feel of those Patriot teams in the mid to 2010s where Gronk was, as Gronk started to get older, and I know he retired very young, but his body was like 65 at age 25. Mm-hmm. A lot like Kelsey, where it's like, I remember Bill Simmons used to have this line. I think it might be his best line he's had in like 15 years since the BS report days of, Gronk was the guy that you put in the 4-car garage. He's off to the side and as the muscle car that you break out only in the really nice weather and only a couple times a year. Kelsey kind of gets broken out a couple times a year now. He's just always in acres of space, and he gets away with, a lot of taunting and doing the whole thing. But like, he's earned it, and he's in his mid-30s now, and I still fully expect him to have 6 for 87 and a touchdown on Sunday because that's just what happens in these games. And then lastly, with the Chiefs, I talked about coaching as an Andy Reid thing. Spags is got every argument. It won't happen, Mike, because once you open Pandora's box of coordinators in the Hall of Fame, it's really difficult. But he's got a lot of the like Mike Maddox, those type of the pitching coaches that are like mysterious. It's like every year they like the Rays bring in 3 pitchers that are no one's ever heard of, and all of a sudden they throw 98 and they have a 2 ERA for a year, and they go somewhere else and they suck. I'm not saying that's what the Chiefs are in that sense, but in a lot of ways, this is a lot of day 3 picks. It's a lot of guys that they've developed, and it's credit to Brett Veach and Mike Morganzi and that staff that's gotten them together, and Andy Reid and et cetera. But Spags puts a defense that's got a star in Chris Jones. I'd argue a star in Trent McDuffie. Mm-hmm. And then some shrewd free agency signings, right? You look at a Justin Reed and guys like that. You look at them, the roster's built in a way that while everyone always complains on offense, where's like the special, I know they got the DeAndre Hopkins at this age. I think I'm sure he'll make a couple plays, but he's not, Bill O'Brien, D-Hop.
Yep.
But the most important thing is they've hit on day 3 so well that they were able to rebuild so quickly, do the competitive rebuild that they never really lost a step at all after trading Tyreek. So, yeah.
Well, to that point, I just wanted to bring this up because I wrote this down. I mentioned a couple of the names, but in 2021, they went Creed Humphrey, Nick Bolton, Noah Gray, who I think is a good player, right? He's behind.
Yeah, who they've already extended.
And Trey Smith. In 2022, when they said they looked at their defense and like, we have to get younger, Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, Cook, Leo Chenal, Jalen Watson, Johnson's name, who I can't say, but he plays for them at corner, and Pacheco. Like, if you want to continue the era of success, you have a draft or 2 like that back to back. You set yourself up for the next 5-6 years. Again, with it just like, if you hit on those picks and they hit on those picks, by and large, it's like, boom, you're all set. You have this foundation, or you have these ancillary pieces to go with the foundational piece in Patrick Mahomes, and obviously the coaching that you just referenced and I referenced at the beginning and Reid and Spagnuolo. It's like, you're in a great spot. Like you're
you saw New England, right? It's like it was when Bill was at his best and where the Chiefs are at their best. We got the quarterback, we've got a couple stars on both sides of the ball, but once you start to pay those guys, you do have to adjust, and you got to nail day 2, you got to nail day 3, and obviously from the Patriots' perspective, it got ugly at the end with Bill, but there was a long while there where it was like every year you're like, ooh, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Who's this guy on the start of training camp? And by week 4, you're like, are they a Pro Bowler? Like for every, Gronk and, and we always talk about that. It's the infamous, what was that, 2010 draft for the Patriots with Hernandez, Gronk, and Devin.
Yes.
For every draft that's like, ooh, the top 50 pick, Pro Bowl, all pro level guys. There are a million other, like, oh, we just pulled Rob Ninkovich and Jamie Collins and, all these different guys. I don't know why I can't think of a singular name right now in my head, but like, all those guys, you have to keep rebuilding. And the Chiefs have done a really good job of like, we haven't had a legit left tackle in like 4 years, and we've figured out a way to make it work because we've done enough work elsewhere that we can kind of around the margins be so dominant interior wise. You compensate for that. We give tight end help. And it's interesting, at least to watch.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to say before we get on to the actual game itself is just, there's one other thing. There's one other quotient about this team that it's hard to measure, but they have won 17 straight one-score games dating back to 2023, 2024, 12 this year, without an awesome offense, with a defense that last year was awesome, but it took a little bit of a step back this year, around 20 points per game. Yeah, it's not the same unit, even as it was in the beginning of the year. But they just find a way to hang around, and then whether it's the specter of Mahomes looming on the other sideline, whether it's just that teams know this has happened and keeps happening, something happens in that fourth quarter of these close games. They won 4 games this year on the very last play of the game, including a blocked field goal from 35 yards, which they had, by all accounts, had scouted that there was an issue on the left side. And in the big moment, yeah, that's what they say, they blew it up. So there is that quotient that you can't necessarily measure, but just like it was with Brady at his height, if it was a fourth quarter game and it was close, you knew that guy was going to get the ball and either put you in the lead or damn well get you down to the end of the game and tie it up. Like that, he just has that capability, and that's something that
it's not beating yourself, right? It's literally the equivalent of. They remind me a lot, and this is maybe not the best comp. They feel, and we're going to talk about obviously what we think is going to happen here in a second, but this has a little bit of the end of the Yankees dynasty in the late 90s, early 2000s, where like
got to bring it back to the Yankees.
It started to dwindle. No, but the talent dwindled a little bit, but like we still have some of the best players. We know how to win. It's like, how do they keep doing this? Why? Like, how do they keep kind of escaping by the skin of their teeth every time? And again, obviously, it's not the greatest example because like it's not really a 1-for-1 Mahomes and the whole thing, but it's just this, I know how to win, and like the other team is going to beat themselves. We're not going to swing at bad pitches. You're going to swing at the bad pitches. Like that's kind of what it feels like the Chiefs do. Like they wait for you to chase curveballs down and away. Eventually you're going to do it. And they refuse to swing it. They spit at it every time.
It's an excellent point. I just want to remind you that the Boston Red Sox in 2004, they ended that Yankee dynasty.
I was going to say that this might be their 2001 moment where the Yankees choke in Game 7. But I was going to hurt myself, and instead you made it even worse.
So probably too late for you to get tickets to the big game, but as we mentioned, we're in the middle of the NBA, the NHL season, college basketball, college hockey in my region, like if you're into it. And then pretty soon, baseball season, speaking of the Yankees and the Red Sox, April right around the corner, or spring training games in February if you'd be lucky enough to get down to Florida or Arizona, which, by the way, I could use desperately as the snow continues to pile up. And I think we have more coming on Sunday. So look, you want to go to a game, just use GameTime. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff, showing incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets to find the best value. On-time ticket delivery, lowest price guarantee, and I love the feature where you can see the seat and where you're going to sit, the actual seat from the stadium, to see where you're going to be sitting, so you realize I'm too far away, or there's a pole over there, or whatever. I'm in the middle of a bunch of people that I don't want to be in. Like, let me go someplace else. So just download the GameTime app, create the account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed to the game. And this thing has been broken down in 1,000,001 ways over the last 12, 13 days. I guess I will start with you with when I look at key factors in this game. Will Vic Fangio continue to play those safeties back as he's done all along? Not blitz. They don't blitz very much. They blitz Jaden Daniels earlier in the season, but then like back to the normal way. They just think they can get to you with 4, and by and large, they've been able to get to you with 4. Is Mahomes at the point in his career, and we've seen over the last couple of years, where he's just going to be, all right, fine, I'll take the 5, I'll take the 4, I'll take the profit all day long, and continue to move the football that way, 12, 13, 14 play drives, which they've been a master of this season. If he's willing to do that, not turn the ball over, because I think turnovers would be critical, especially for me. Well, for both. They're always critical. But, like, manage the football game in that way, and it makes it a fourth quarter game. And we just talked about the winning quotient. So all of a sudden you're in the fourth quarter game. And if you're within a score, that's when the guys on the other side say, all right, are we going to be the ones to do it? I look at the matchup up front, Will, with the Chiefs offensive line, which we just talked about, building from the interior, but now taking away the strength of the interior a little bit by moving Tooney out of necessity out to left tackle. And he's been fine. Solid, right? Like, okay, nothing – a lot better than what they had there. But now they put Mike Caliendo, who's an undrafted free agent at left guard. Mike Caliendo is going to be lined up mostly across from Milton Williams. For those who aren't familiar with Milton Williams, I know you've mentioned him earlier this year. He is someone who's going to make a crap ton of money in free agency. Oh, yeah. Probably going to have to be from somebody else just based on how Philadelphia is built. There's also the possibility that Vic Fangio and Nick Sirianni look at this and say, hey, you know what? Jalen Carter, maybe every once in a while, let's get you over there, much like how Kansas City will move Chris Jones around and try to take advantage of that spot. And then, of course, Jawan Taylor at right tackle, largely going to be facing Nolan Smith, but Nolan Smith has really come on as a pass rusher. That speed, we know Jawan has a habit of lining up in the backfield, moving early. Sometimes he gets away with it. Sometimes he doesn't. But, like, can that 4 without pressure, just those 4 guys, can they do enough to disrupt the Chiefs offense that, again, as we said, they're fine, but this is not the best Chief offense. Can they do that? Because 15 of the last 16 games, basically, that defensive line has done just that.
Yeah, I think this game's going to come down to a couple of things. And I have tried to talk myself out of picking the Chiefs all week because I'm like, just like we talked about, it's, the Eagles outplayed the Chiefs full stop. Mahomes on a bad ankle 2 years ago, and Jalen Hurts made one mistake, and it cost them. It just did. And then everyone always like, "Ooh, if they don't throw the flag there, the Chiefs still would have they still could have scored." And there's no indication that the Eagles were going to go down and score. You know what I mean? Like, we can do that all day long. The Chiefs have got to contain Saquon Barkley. He cannot have the 75-yard touchdown. He just can't. Like, Mike, he can't do it, because if he does that, now everything opens up for Hurts. And now he can start to really, now you got, can Fangio sitting too high the whole time? If Saquon starts beating you, like, if I'm Philly, we talked about this last week, and they did a great job of it. Kellen Moore has got to be like, this is not about me. No one cares that I played quarterback. No one cares that I'm going to be the Saints head coach. I'm going to run it down their throat. I'm going to keep Mahomes off the field. I'm going to limit Jalen's mistakes. I'm going to keep this in third manageable. I'm going to keep our screen game open. I'm going to keep A.J. Brown. And I want Fangio to sit in cover 2 and have to break it. If I can break, not Fangio, cover 2. Spags needs to sit back there and say, hey, like, we're going to let Jalen, we're going to sit in zone and let Jalen try to pick us apart, because that's what you should do. And you cannot let, if they let Saquon get going and Spags has to start doing some of this crazy stuff that he probably wants to save for the fourth quarter but can't afford to, right. I feel like they've won, because on the flip side, this front 4 of the Eagles should be able to get after Mahomes, similar to what happened in Tampa 4 years ago. COVID year, yeah. That field 2 years ago was terrible. We understand that it's not going to happen this. The Eagles have played down in New Orleans this year. They should be used to what they saw from a turf perspective. It's probably one of their worst games of the year. But this has got to be, if you're an Eagles fan, like, you have to feel good going in this game, because you're the better. You're the better team.
Yeah, but do you? That's the problem. Like, I've looked at this thing from every angle possible, and everything tells me Philadelphia should win the football game. And
Everything.
yet, because of what Kansas City has done, because of that winning quotient, because of Patrick, because of Spags in these big moments, again, we just saw it in the AFC Championship game. Corner blitz, he hadn't like just in the biggest moment, had the balls to make that call, and it paid off, right? So, like, that's the problem. It's like if Philadelphia can get out to a 2-score lead, like, and build that comfort and confidence, then you get to the fourth quarter. And
yeah, if it's like 14-3 after one, are you like,
yes?
And if you're Kansas City, I talk about the Philly being able to run the football to give Jalen Hurts. If you're Kansas City, you like to keep Philly's offense off the field. You'd like to keep that pass rush honest. I'd like to see does Isaiah Pacheco look like the Isaiah Pacheco we kind of saw the last 2 years, and obviously the broken leg came back probably far earlier than he should have. I know, Tooney not being inside obviously hurts you and the whole thing, but can they get something going in the run game? Can we saw even last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess now, Kareem Hunt kind of had a little fountain of youth moment where he was getting some pop in a few, and Buffalo, we said that's where Buffalo's weakest, and they kind of regained the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
This is obviously a huge line of scrimmage game, and I mentioned the kicking game. Kansas City's had some big moments in the kicking game this playoffs. The first play of the playoffs for them, they take the ball 75 yards back, and I don't know, looking back the way that game got played, like that was a huge difference. Philly, as I mentioned, has the ability to, house one and do these different things, but they've missed kicks. And like, does Sirianni have to get forced into going for two earlier than he wants? Does Kansas City try to do something crazy early on? Like, there's so many different things that can happen, but I guess I'm going to land on Philly gets it done. And we have the annoying conversations on Monday, and every debate show will, now where's Mahomes rank? Is he actually better than Peyton? Is he because right now everyone's doing he's already the GOAT conversation, which I think is extremely disrespectful to Brady, and I'm not a Patriots guy.
Right.
But I do think this just feels like it is going to look a little bit more like the Tampa Chiefs one, not necessarily from the score of that game outcome, but they got after Mahomes early and often, and they just disrupted timing, and it was like him running around and the guys back there in Philly's defense. The one guy I'm curious, if Philly wants to win this game, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson needs to not get like
implode.
Yeah, because he's got him and AJ Brown both have the temperamental where, like, when they're on, very different caliber players, but when they're on, they're awesome. But there is a switch in there that goes off sometimes way too quickly. And we've seen CJ try to make a big play, try to come up and hit somebody and whiff. And it's like, oh boy, what was that? And then he gets a penalty. And then it's like it unravels, and they cannot afford that because, again, like, as I've said a million times, the Eagles do beat themselves sometimes, that they're not I don't think they're a greatly coached team. The Chiefs do not. And again, the Eagles beat themselves 2 years ago. They cannot afford to do it again. I think they're going to win, but when the other team you play doesn't beat yourself and you have that mentality, aura, whatever you want to call it, around you, it's really hard to pick against them. I just think Philly's roster is too good.
I think Philly's got the best roster. I think this should be their moment. One thing you mentioned that I just want to quickly my 2 cents on it was the Kellen Moore conversation. And it's not only Barkley and continuing to hand the ball off to Barkley, which I think even if they find themselves down at some point, but like, can you find a way to get AJ Brown the ball? The first 2 playoff games, he had 10 targets and 3 catches. And it was like the couple of the throws were just like, just throw it in his general direction. And, he's reading books on the sidelines. And then in the NFC Championship game, he's a friggin' horse, because he is a horse. 8 targets, 6 catches, big touchdown, nearly 100 yards receiving. Get that dude involved early. Get him involved often. Again, crossing routes. Like, I know they love the one-on-one stuff. If he's leaving, that whole thing. But, like, generate some touches for him so to make sure that he is
Can we get like
in
a
the proper
headspace in the
headspace.
First 2 drives and like let AJ run?
We've been asking for this for like 2 months, and they have this. He has this aversion to it, but like, get that guy involved, because that guy's good enough to change the game on one play. He's 6'1", he's 226 pounds. Trent McDuffie's 195. Jalen Watson's 193. Like, go ahead. Tackle me in space. Try it.
Yeah, the one thing that, and Dev mentioned this in the pod the other day, and I actually didn't really think about it, he's like, I'd like to see Jalen Hurts not slide in front of a DB on the first couple of drives. Like, put your shoulder down maybe a little bit, or try to make a move or do something. I agree. I think I know he's been banged up at times, and I get all of that, but he's not been the same runner, in my opinion, for a while now. And maybe the body's just going to get to the point where like he can't stay healthy. Yeah. It's just he's gotten beat up over years and years in college of being a running back / quarterback, and the whole thing. That was intentionally. I'd dig at Jalen Hurts, but he's going to need to keep them honest a little bit with the legs, like the 3-4 yard scramble and slide Spags doesn't care. It's does he crease them for 2 20-yard runs on a drive? They bail out. They're in man. No one spies Hurts, and he's out for 40 yards in a drive. That's when it's like, ooh, okay, Jalen wants to run today. Then it changes your plan. He's got to keep him honest. The same thing with AJ. Like, you can't just be like, ooh, we'll get him eventually, because he'll implode. He will. He's a great player, but he's got a trigger up there that is like few we've seen in a while.
Yeah, he's the kind of guy that if they lose, I fully expect the trade requests to make the rounds, unfollow teams on Instagram, that whole thing. And if they win, I still think it's a possibility, because I still think
he's a Patriot.
I think it's the way he's wired.
There's just too much. Like, I need 2 2s. He gets the Tyreek package of 2 2s, and I think a 4th and a 6th or something like that. The Patriots, it's the Vrabel. They need for him. He's going to get 275 targets next year, probably break the catches record. They'll win 7 games. He'll be angry again in 2 years. Right. Maybe he'll be like Tyreek and want to have 9 more kids. I don't know. But it has a lot of the same feel of like, okay, I won. This is cool. I've gotten paid a bunch. But now can I go back with the guy I want to be with, and the whole thing. That's just, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what it feels like.
Patriot fans would be very happy with that. Let's get to our prize picks.
Mike, by the way, we said the Commanders, Myles Garrett was was not so shy about saying that would be a spot he would enjoy.
I was on NBC Sports Boston Wednesday night. We're taping this on Thursday. It's 5:30 in the evening, and they were like, "Oh, Drake May, he's recruiting people, and he's talking about recruiting people. He's on with Kay Adams and all these things, talking about, oh yeah, let him know about the Foxboro." And I was like, let me ask you, who's more attractive, Jaden Daniels or Drake May? Drake May played on a 4-win team that's been a 4-win team for 2 years in a row. Again, not largely his fault, but okay, so some signs. But you haven't won any games. Jaden Daniels in his rookie year was just playing in the NFC Championship game, and they were frisky for a little while in that NFC Championship game. Yeah, there's a lot of attraction to that guy because people already feel like he's special. Drake maybe just not there yet. Let's get to prize picks. I have 4. So I will lead us off with prize picks for the big game. Well, 4 in addition to the Pat Mahomes more than a half-yard passing. And that would be, and I can't believe I'm doing this, Juju Smith-Schuster, more than 1.5 receptions.
I like it.
Vic Fangio versus Mahomes. Mahomes works the middle of the field a ton of times, and that's where Juju has to live at this point because he can't run. So Juju, more than 1.5 receptions. I'm going to go with I've been riding this, the Xavier Worthy, more than 6.5 yards rushing. He's going to get a couple touches, jet sweeps, reverses, what have you. They've got something special drawn up for this game that he will likely be a part of on the ground. So again, more than 6.5 yards rushing. Dallas Goedert, who I think has been playing awesome football, more than 52.5 yards receiving. Kansas City struggled a little bit with the tight ends. And lastly, Saquon Barkley, rushing or receiving, more than a half a touchdown. I think Saquon finds his way into the end zone in this one.
All right, these are some deep cuts.
I like it.
Samaje Perine, more than 6.5 receiving yards.
Love it.
He's gonna have 2 catches for 14 yards. I take it to the bank. Thank me later. Couple of weird ones, I guess, to finish. I'll give you 2. You talked about Juju. I also like a Juju more. 17.5 yards. convince me why he's not 4 for 42 in this game. Like he does play well in big games. Mahomes trusts him. He's always open over the middle of the field because he doesn't have to beat man and do these different things. He'll catch one dig route. I mean, one dig route for 18 yards. We're locked in.
Yep.
I'll give you 2 last ones here. I said that Travis Kelce is going to have, he'll have some moment in this game. I do like less than 62.5 receiving yards. It feels like the Eagles are going to be like somebody else do it. Like, and Fangio, and he'll just, I don't know. I could see them.
Noah Gray, you come out there and do it.
Yeah, give him a bit of a hard time. And then last one, and I mentioned this guy before, Jalen Hurts at 9.5 rushing attempts feels, I understand the tush push stuff, but I'm going to go slightly less. I think he ends up with 6 or 7. So less than for Jalen Hurts rushing attempts, Juju more yards, Samaje Perine more receiving yards, and Travis Kelce less than yards.
I love the Samaje Perine one. It
happens every time.
Little swing pass or screen, bing, bam, boom. All right. Well, we appreciate you guys tuning into this edition of the All 32 Pod. Remember to like, listen, subscribe, rate, review, do all those wonderful things. He is Will Parkinson. I am Mike Giardi. Enjoy the football game on Sunday. We will be back on Monday to dice it up. And we're both picking the Philadelphia Eagles, which will probably come back.
Might as well cash your Chiefs bets because we might
all right. See ya.
It is caught! Touchdown! The New England Patriots select Drake